So once again, we're covering distorted thinking. I'm going to keep this one short because the other one took a long time. So here goes. So what I want to talk about today is one that I think a lot of people get into and I think is a big fucking deal. And the reason is because I think this is a very interesting discussion around things that are logistical being framed as moral. We're going to talk about shoulds. So you have a list of ironclad rules about how you and others should act. People who break the rules anger you, and you feel guilty if you violate the rules. So let's talk about this one, because this shit is problematic. So here's what happens. A kid has an authoritarian parent who expects a level of standard that the kid is not quite possibly able to do. Or maybe they were in a high school setting, but maybe not an adult setting, or some other conflict or contention there. When this kid isn't able to perform, as they once did, maybe under the thumb of their authoritarian parent, what happens is that kid begins to beat themselves up. This can also happen with neurodivergent kids. If you're ADHD, like me, and you have an idea of what normalcy is and what normal people can do, you may beat the shit out of yourself with shoulds. The problem with shoulds is twofold. One, whenever we say we should be a certain way, or you should do this, or you should be practicing this, we're actually making one of two statements, and a lot of people confuse these. Should can either be framed as a must or an ought statement. I'll give an example of those. So, should in the must statement is the moral argument of you must do this. You should really be nicer to people, which is really saying you must be nicer to people. Right? It's not really giving you an option. Not really. Right? Or you must pass your classes. That has a level of weight to it that can be very, very like difficult for people. We can kind of counterpoint this with the idea of should as ought, right? You ought to brush your teeth. If you don't, there's a consequence. You ought to wear shoes outside so you don't get rocks in your feet. Each of these things are sort of describing a way in which it would be beneficial to do this, but it's not, or there might be consequences if you don't, but it's not saying you must. And I think in a lot of times when we're dealing with authoritarian parents, what happens is that they will bring this up with a kid where they will hold these very rigid notions. I actually see this with leftists too. There's this way in which I think a lot more of the sort of, again, that term of people, what they will do is essentially operate under an ironclad list of shoulds. People should behave this way. They should be this, or leftists should act like this, which actually is very reductive. What it actually does is I think it actually hurts us, because what I think it does in most circumstances is it actually reduces the idea of what these people are. It also is very easy to, again, overgeneralize at that point. So shoulds actually become an issue both directions. When inflicted inward, they can become a way that if we're not meeting those standards to beat ourselves up, or a should can be something we project out at the other that we use to judge them or have a sense of moralistic control. Remember that when people are bringing up morals and bringing up ways in which you're somehow being immoral, are they doing this because they actually want you to change and grow, or they think that you're in error, or are they bringing this up to moralize and be superior? I mean, I think that's a good question, because I would say both phenomenon happen, right? If I say, hey, you might not want to cheat on your girlfriend, that's not me being an authoritarian. That's not me trying to be superior. That's me saying, like, hey, you might not want to hurt this person's feelings. You might want to actually honor the relationship, maybe kind of. But if I say this person is this way, or you were bad, or you were this, and I hold that over your head, then there's a way in which I'm sort of assuming or taking a certain level of power. I think this actually is very true in a lot of the online left, especially around the people who are doing sort of these sort of harassment-based attacks against certain creators. I think there's a way in which they have an idea of how people should be. And the problem is human beings are more complicated than that. Again, we can actually point out how all of these types of distorted thinking actually flow into one another. right? So you can make an argument that there's certain shoulds that we project on other people that by definition can cause us to overgeneralize and have polarized thinking, either things are good or bad. And if we take all those shoulds and beat ourselves up internally, then all of a sudden we might start catastrophizing. Like, if I don't make it, then I'm a terrible person. If I'm a terrible person, I'll never find love. If I never find love, etc. You want to know about those videos? They'll be around here somewhere. But I want you guys to understand this, is that I actually think it's really important to be clear with what should you're using, right? What should is actually being used here. If I say you should brush your teeth, that's an ought statement. You might want to do that. Good for you, right? But if I say you shouldn't be racist, I'm actually saying you must not be racist. I'm actually not really giving an option, which in that case, I actually agree with. But when you say you shouldn't be racist to somebody who's not engaging in that action, what you're doing is you're asserting something, right? You're actually asserting that this is the way they are. There's a problem with these shoulds, is that when people don't meet your internal standards of how they should be, get it? What happens is that often we use this as a way to judge them, just like we would do to judge ourselves. Now, I'm not trying to throw judgment under the bus. Judgment can be very useful. It can be a very useful way to sort of curtail certain behaviors and things like that. But it often can lead to very, very negative outcomes, including beating the shit out of yourself for fun and profit. Like, literally, just because you can't meet these standards, obviously you're a bad person. But the problem is like the whole framing of that is broken, right? Like, one, what are the standards? Are the standards fair? Are the standards realistic? Are you holding yourself to a standard that existed in a different context? Is there a way that this standard is unreasonable? Is this standard based on trauma or the views of an authority figure who isn't you? Right? By just asking some very simple questions, we can actually simply deconstruct the way that we look at these messages we give ourselves. Right? Chat, what is your thought on this? I know this one's a little faster than the other one, but like, I want you guys to really think about this. Like, does this make sense about shoulds? Like, this idea as we're talking about, this way in which we sort of hold people to expectations that they themselves may not have for themselves, or we hold ourselves to standards that may not be realistic in any meaningful way. Is this tracking? Is this making sense? I'll give the chat a minute to catch up. Maybe a little bit of latency. So like, the idea here is very, very simple. When you use should, you're essentially, in many cases, not saying an ought statement. What you're saying is a must statement, or making a line, a rule, a line in the sand, so to speak, to be able to, in some ways, say, if you're not past this certain line, you're not good. And we do this to other people. We do this to ourselves. So I think it's really important that we keep this in mind, especially for our mental health. The whole point of this distorted thinking series is just that, for your mental health. The problem is that we often get into these thought patterns, and they often come as Count Frollo situation. Explain, please, Haunted Donut Shop. I'm not familiar with that name, though it sounds familiar. But you can actually say that should statements are basically like how most judgment and aggression happens. You should be this way, or things should be this way. I think. Oh yeah. Okay, I thought it was that guy. Hellfire is a fucking terrifying song. Yeah. Because the outcome is if you fail at the expectation, Tova, then the fact is that you then sit there and beat yourself up, right? We can get into a discussion about shame at another time. The short version is I don't think shame's actually a feeling. I actually think it's an action. I would argue guilt's a feeling, but shame actually is something that's been debated for centuries as to what the fuck it is. And my general consensus is it appears to be a behavior. It's something where we bring up thoughts, maybe messages from our parents or other stuff like that. And so, for example, let's say you don't meet your standard, you don't pass your classes or something, and then you go, well, I must be a fucking idiot. And that's the same thing my dad said to me. And then so you then start beating yourself up with that. You're actually doing a form of emotional self-harm at that point, using cognition as the sort of vehicle, if that makes any sense. So I just want you guys to look out for these shoulds. Oh, Ray Ray's got just subscribed. Thank you, Ray Ray. Neat. Getting a bunch of subscribers tonight. Hoggers. So I want to get to the other topics tonight, but I also want you guys to understand this stuff really well. Shoulds. Wow, Maggie Moo8, long plays, just subscribed. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So I want you guys to understand this, that in some ways these shoulds are really important to note. When you're saying this to yourself or others, what do you mean? What is the outcome? What is the goal? Right? I think that's a really good discussion to have. So I'm going to leave this one here. We're always going to come back to these because we're going to get through this list. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment, subscribe. If you want, you can ring the bell to get notified when we have new videos, or you can donate, which is always super helpful. We really appreciate it. You can donate at streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip for a one-time donation and a cute little gift that comes up of a rainbow Godzilla. Or you can become a patron at patreon.com/transgirltherapist. And I will see you guys in the next one.